Geoffrey, welcome to Deal Diary.
Hey Ella, how you doing?
I'm good.
Thanks.
So, we met in Cody Sanchez's mastermind.
Yep, we did.
I'm curious, give the listeners a background of how you found out about Cody and what made you come into an M&A community.
Yeah, I think it follows the same trajectory as most people that are in the group. Cody's got a lot of presence on social media, right? She says a lot of the right things. She's garnered a pretty significant following. So I had originally found her content like a year and a half or two before actually pulling the trigger and joining the mastermind. And it was interesting, right? Like my background is business. I'm in the corporate world. Um, and I'm also a business owner, right? So the ideas that she was pushing and sort of the concept that she brought to the table was pretty compelling. So, it was like a couple years of listening to the content um, and going down some rabbit holes of investigation and learning and discovery. And then last year, so 2023, things had sort of aligned in such a way that it was looking like a more serious venture to really focus on, like with an intent to exit the corporate world. And so the best option at the time was to surround myself with people of that same objective. And so the only reference point that I have was Cody Sanchez's group, which is ultimately what I decided to do. And so far, it's been great. I mean, like I've met you, I've met Kiara, I've met a bunch of people in the group that are really, really intelligent and have sort of similar goals and objectives. And it's been a good community so far.
I know. I love meeting people that just have the same values and mission. And so you've purchased a car wash up in
hmm
Reno.
Yep.
Talk us through why you decided in that sector and how that deal came about for you.
Sure. So I live in Reno. A lot of people don't know where it is, close to Lake Tahoe, kind of centered in the mountains of the Sierra Nevadas in northern Nevada, Northern California. And yeah, 2022 we closed on a 6 bay self-serve car wash site in the city of Reno. Um, it's myself and a business partner. Um, and really, I think it all boils down to the 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 business itself is really appealing for two reasons. And the first reason is I'm a big real estate guy. I like real estate. There's a lot of reasons why real estate is a very attractive asset class to own. Most people get involved in real estate on the residential side, either multifamily units or like apartment complexes, that sort of thing, or even single family for like your vacation rentals or like a portfolio of small single family rental units. Um, I learned very quickly I don't like that. I don't like dealing with tenants. It tugs on the wrong heartstrings for me. Um, Having to evict somebody or kick somebody out like just sucks because you upend like an entire world of somebody that you don't know, which is really not okay for me, just personally speaking, right? Some people can do it. I don't know how they do it. Um, but real estate is, like, leaving that aside, real estate is great. Um, there's a lot of tax benefits. There's a lot of pride and joy in being able to like touch it, see it, feel it. The whole thing that goes along with like owning something physical. Um, and so when I was trying to figure out like what's next or what would be a good sort of similar asset class with the same benefits, I started looking at a lot of different things, and um, and car washes were really nice because they traditionally trade for a cheaper price relative to the upside with the same level of benefit on the real estate aspects of it. And it's mechanical in nature, right? And so my background, my mind, the way that I think is all very logical and mechanically driven. And so it's really easy to wrap my head around. I can look at something very quickly and understand the entirety of the system. Um, and car washes are one of the select few asset classes where you can do that. And so there just so happened to be one in Reno. Um, Chased it down for like 6 months. It was a long process. started in spring, closed in winter, right? December 2022. And so far it's been great. I mean, it's a great asset class. It's cool to say, right? It's a great icebreaker for conversations. And it's opened up a lot of pathways, right? I've met a lot of people. I've learned a lot of things about, business buying, about lending, about different debt structures, how to think about, owning a bigger business and things that I've owned in the past. So a lot of lessons learned. It's great. It's really, really great.
Talk us through actually how the deal was structured? What was the purchase price and the
Sure.
multiple, or if you want to go into the cap rate? I feel
Yeah.
like we'll go into that because most people might not know what we didn't know. Kiara and I was like, educate us.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Um, uh, so business buying and real estate valuations are typically done very separately, right? In the real estate world, we have something that's called a cap rate, capitalization rate, which in very simplistic terms is the expected return on your investment if you purchase something with cash, right? So a 10 cap, if I pay $100 for it, my expected return is $10, 10%, right? And so car washes in general, because they are so asset heavy on the real estate side, are typically valued on a cap rate basis. And they trade at, generally speaking, higher cap rates than most other asset classes on real estate. You'll see like triple net leases, so your like Walgreens, your CVS pharmacies, your like big commercial properties trading in like mid single digits, 4, 5, 6, 7%, depending on the market. Car washes, you'll see like anywhere from 11, 12, 15%, depending on where the site is located. And so a higher cap rate is generally better because you're getting more for your money when you're spending, right? So this deal, it's in Reno. Reno is generally a little bit more in demand market than I would say some other regions, right? We're really close to California. You've got a lot of people from California moving here. Home prices have gone up, land prices have gone up, real estate in general has gone up. So for this deal, purchase price was $1.2 million. It was trading at right about a 9.5 cap, which meant NOI, so net operating income, or EBITDA or SDE, those are all sort of synonymous, was around 110-ish thousand a year, depending on, different seller discretionary spending on like marketing and stuff like that. We can debate that at a different time, but generally speaking, that's where we saw it when we were forecasting it. And then the structure was broken down. It was an SBA loan. We did 504, which is a great product. Anybody that's doing real estate that qualifies, highly recommend. We have 3 notes, so three pieces of debt on the deal. First is with a bank, second is with SBA, and then third was with the seller. And then we put in about 20% equity into the deal to bridge the gap. And so it's all amortized over 25 years because of the real estate portion. The seller, we have a little bit shy of like $100,000 note on the deal for 5 years. And then we brought about 260,000 in cash to the closing table in 2022.
I love this. It's great. So, when you found this deal, was it an on market or an off market deal?
I was on market.
Nice.
Yep.
And how did you find the relationship with the broker and the seller?
So the listing, so it was a really interesting story. This was originally listed in like March of 2022. The gentleman that bought it is an outfit out of Oregon, and they were sort of flippers. You could think of them that way. So what they did is they would go into various different markets on the West Coast. They would buy car washes. They would fix them up, operate them for 2 years, and then sell them. They needed the 2 years for like seasoning of the revenues that they would generate. So 2 years, they'd have enough to like a bank would sign off on it, and then they could sell it for whatever the gain is on the value of the asset, right? So the broker that was offering it for sale is the same broker that helped him buy it like 3 years prior. So they had a pretty tight relationship already. And then inside of the brokerage that was listing it was the buy side broker. So the buy side broker and the sell side broker were in the same office, which really helped because they sort of knew each other's dynamics. They were partners anyway. And they had been trying to sell it since March. They've had a couple deals fall through, and I was like one of the only people still knocking at the door 6 months later. And originally we were going to try and do it self-represented, meaning no broker representation at all. But we ultimately decided to go with the in-house buy-side broker just to try and help move things along a little bit, in the interest of confidence in the deal being able to materialize, in interest of me and my partner not having to like waste a bunch of time following up with emails and effectively, wasting time when we could be doing other stuff that's more material to the deal itself. And it turned out to be the right decision. We got a lot of help and insight from them. We got some insight into some other things that were happening in the area or in Nevada in general, which was really cool. And then they were pretty instrumental because they wanted the deal to close. They wanted to get paid. And so we were able to put a pretty solid contract together and ultimately have some pretty good success.
So good. I love this. And so when you got your buy side broker, I'm curious, what is their commission structure?
So buy side broker, all brokers are paid for by the seller. It's part of the fees to close a deal on the sell side. So we don't actually know what his fee was. We think it was somewhere in the 2.5% to 5% range. That's pretty industry average. They'll like split it 50-50 between the two of them. Maybe they'll get a slight discount because it's the same brokerage. They're not like, sell side broker and buy side are independent, like unrelated. But we don't actually know. We're not really privy to that information.
Okay, interesting. So even though you've gauged them, the seller still paid the commission. They just split it. Okay.
Generally speaking, it's sort of like buying a house, right? Like in the US, if you buy a house, your agent on the buy side is paid for out of the proceeds of the sale from the seller side, right? In the US, you have on the single family real estate side, you have a little bit more visibility into what the broker's commission is because you're dealing directly with your personal real estate broker. But for this deal specifically, when we signed our agency agreement, right, our representation agreement with the broker, we don't know what they're going to get paid. We can just assume.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And then I'm curious, with the seller carry being $100,000, we spoke to a bank recently that was like, oh, on paper, the bank won't let you pay back that seller carry until the 100% of their note is paid off. How did you go around that?
So I think that this is a sticking point for a lot of banks. Generally speaking, what we found is if you're not intending to use the seller note as equity in the deal, meaning it's considered just debt, there's no need for this so-called standby treatment, right? If you are, like on the SBA side, right, if you're going to go and do like a 7A loan, right, and you're going to get the seller to put 5% seller carry, and you're going to use that as equity, then it has to be on standby. But if you're just treating it as debt, I think most banks will let you do it so long as you don't. They might have limits on like your overall leverage and your debt service coverage. Like there's some limitations there that you'll have to figure out. But generally speaking, for this deal, we didn't treat it as equity. We just treated it as debt. And because we were able to do that, and we were bringing 20% of the project value as equity from our personal contribution, and we didn't have any issues on debt coverage, it was no problem.
That makes so much sense. And so let's say you're at the due diligence phase. What was your checklist process as far as like equipment, utility bills, customers, the pits? Like talk us through what your DD period looked like.
Yeah, we had a lot to learn, frankly speaking. Um, it was sort of iterative. We had originally scheduled 45 days for due diligence. We ended up going to 60, I think, if I remember correctly. Um, and we we first sort of hit like the obvious stuff, right? So it's a car wash. Anybody who's used one understands the basics, right? You have water, you have product, you have electricity, right? You have these big ticket utility bills that are generally speaking pretty easy to validate. It's phone call to the utility company. Most of the time, um, I mean, what we did is we got physical invoices from the utility company, sense check that with like a phone call to the utility company to look at averages for like the year. Um, that all was baked into our forward-looking analysis. Um, Property taxes is another big one. I think that people miss. Um, Depending on the state that you're in, property tax valuations will be treated very differently pre and post close. So, as an example, in California, if you buy something, it's reassessed, reappraised. Your property taxes will likely go up unless you got a steep discount on the purchase price relative to its existing tax basis. In Nevada, they don't do that. It's not a fair market state. In Nevada, things are always readjusted and appraised every year, and there's a cap. So in Nevada, all you need to know is the formula, and you can do a pretty solid forecast of what your property tax liability is going to be. It's pretty close. In other states, it really depends on like the county. It depends on the state. Like so, property taxes are something that I think a lot of people miss. Um, Insurance was another big one that we were like way off on. Um, Insurance in this space is very unique. They're called surplus lines of insurance. It's not a traditional insurance carrier that can insure a car wash. The regions of or the yeah, each region is sort of different in terms of how it allows insurance companies to play. So we got screwed on insurance. We were off on our expectations by like 50%. So that was painful. Um, and then the other big one is on the repair and maintenance side. So that one's one you really got to pay attention to on car washes. They're highly maintenance intensive sites. Anybody that tells you they're passive, full of shit, right? You will have to either find somebody or you will have to be physically present to do the work to keep everything up and running and looking nice. A lot of times these sites gets really abused. People are not kind and they will take advantage of the site itself. And so we underestimated our repair and maintenance by a little bit. But fortunately enough, we haven't like it all comes down to your purchase price and what your expected revenues are going to be. So fortunately, we haven't had a decline in revenues. We've actually been doing quite well. And so we've been able to absorb a lot of those misses in the underwriting process. Um, but it's definitely something that can bite you if you're not taking a really hard look at the condition of the equipment, the type of people, the location, like what's the demographics of the region, the type of person that's going to come and use the site. That's hurt us a couple of times in the last, what are we, 18 months since we closed almost.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And as far as like any other myths around car washes, because I think that is such a big myth saying, just buy it, it's passive income, like there's not much work. And I
No.
remember when Kiara and I got our Geoffrey CFO, as we call you, will like tell us everything. And you're right, like the deal that we were looking at, ultimately it wasn't kept up to a nice amount of maintenance, and you can really tell. And it's such a competitive industry too. Like there are so many
Hmm.
car washes out there. So
Yep.
talk us through any other myths.
Yeah, I think myth number one is that they're passive, right? They're not. Um, you'll have to put some work in, or you're gonna have to find somebody that can do it, which means you have to manage that person, right? So it's never gonna be this truly passive operation like is I think traditionally thought of. Um, uh, the the idea that they're easy, right? They are simple. They're not easy.
Mm,
Simple and easy are two very different words. And so I think the idea that you can come in without knowing at least something about how it works is a myth. You should at least have some exposure or like some understanding of what's going on, instead of just like buying it because it's like everybody has watched Breaking Bad and they see these like things that just pump out cash, right? Not a true story.
mm,
Um, they are, I think a myth that's not really talked about is, they're not easy to buy. They really aren't.
mm,
Um, they are treated very differently than most other things by banks. There's a lot of environmental implications that you have to be cognizant of and be prepared for. Um, Most of the traditional rules of lending don't apply. And so if you go into this thing without that understanding, if you think that it's just like anything else that you can go buy, not a true statement. They are very
mm,
different, and you will likely face serious hurdles, as you move forward in the process. The good thing is, because of all these things, you can get a really good deal sometimes. You really, really can.
mm.
And a lot of times it might be worth the effort you're going to have to put into it. The key is just whether or not it aligns with the goals that you have as, an investor.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited. I want to do a part two around your syndication because I know there's a lot
Sure.
going on in the back end
There's a
around
lot going
that
on there. Yeah.
and how you managed to raise how much capital?
Right now in the bank, we're at about $2.5 million. Soft committed, we're about 3.3.
So
Thank you.
proud.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. If you want to give like a shout out, like say if someone's like, "Hey, I'd love to speak to Geoffrey and like understand more about what you're doing in the car wash industry," where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, I think, I'm not active on a lot of social media, honestly. I pretty off the grid in that regard. But I think what we can do is, I could put my email out there. We could put it in the show notes if you
Mm.
want. I'm happy to
Yeah.
chat. Like I'm an open book, and Ella and Kiara know this. Happy to share any insights, anything I've learned. So we can do that, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah, we should pop in your car wash. Like, what's the name of your car wash in Reno?
Flying Frog Sparks.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you, Geoffrey.
Thank you so much.
Hold on, hold on. Stop.